and humans kind of come together in the history of plastics and ergonomics and how much it changes everything. So when we look at the history of plastic, we start here. We can see in the early days, Mesoamericans made items with natural fibers. We use things like, in Europe, we use horn and tortoiseshell, and those things were used in early plastics. And by 1839, Charles Goodyear invents the process of vulcanization. By 1870, we have the chemist John Hyatt further develop the making of celluloid, and then Alexander Parks, and so it goes. And we can go all the way down to, polystyrene that was invented by Dow Chemical, and we continue to see the use of plastics increase and increase and increase. The first polyethylene bags were seen in the 1950s, so they've been around for about 70 years. So the first man-made plastic was unveiled by Alexander Parks in 1862 at the Great International Exhibition in London. This material, which the public dubbed Parkesine, was an organic material derived from cellulose that once heated could be molded, but that retained its shape when cooled. Parks claimed that this new material could do anything that rubber was capable of, but at a lower price. He had discovered a material that could be transparent as well as carved into thousands of different shapes. But Parkesine soon lost its luster when investors pulled the plug on the product because of the high cost of the raw materials that were needed to make it. And here we can see the next big one is going to be celluloid. And during the latter part of the 19th century, a rush was on to find a replacement for ivory, especially in the use of billiard balls. Very popular game in England. The game became so popular that thousands of elephants were being killed every year because of their ivory, so they could be obtained to make these balls. John Wesley Hyatt, we talked about a second ago, finally came upon the solution in 1866 with celluloid. Hyatt soon found it after he spilled a bottle of collodion in his workshop, and he discovered that the material congealed into a tough, flexible film. He then produced billiard balls using collodion as a substitute for ivory, but because it was highly brittle in nature, the billiard balls would shatter once they had hit each other. So his solution to this, it was definitely a challenge, but he found that he could add camphor, a derivative of the laurel tree, or what you often hear of as bay leaf, that's the laurel tree, and then that would make it more viable. The addition made celluloid the first thermoplastic. The substance molded under heat and pressure into a shape it retained after the heat and pressure had been removed. Celluloid went on to be used in the first flexible photographic film for still and motion pictures. One of the problems with film, though, was that it was highly flammable. The first completely synthetic man-made substance was discovered in 1907 with a New York chemist by the name of Leo Baekeland. He created a liquid resin which he then called Bakelite. Baekeland had developed an apparatus which he called the Bakelizer. Come on, this is just too cool, right? Which enabled him to vary heat and pressure precisely so as to control the reaction of all of the volatile chemicals. Using this pot-like apparatus, Baekeland developed a new liquid, Bakelite resin, which rapidly hardened and took the shape of its container. So no matter what the mold was, it would just take that shape. Once hardened, the resin would form an exact replica of the vessel which contained it. This new material would not burn, would not boil, wouldn't melt or dissolve, or and it also didn't need to be painted. If you put color in it, it would be colored all the way through. And it wouldn't even dissolve if you put acid or a solvent on it. It was the first thermoset plastic which would retain its shape and form under almost any circumstance. Bakelite could be added to almost any material, such as soft wood, and it would make it harder. It would instantly be more durable and more effective. Numerous products began to be manufactured based on this new material. The Airzone 357 Symphony Leader was made in Australia in the late 1930s. So here's like a radio cover, and it was Bakelite. Some people called it the Tombstone. It had a large round dial. It sports an enameled Airzone badge, and the dial lights up from amber to green when it was switched from AM to shortwave. A separate white fitting outlines the speaker grill. An absolutely stunning radio of perfect proportions, and honestly one of my all-time favorites. So here's another Airzone model, the 529 Radio Star. Here we see some sort of like kind of Art Nouveau, replicas kind of pulling in. And again, these were made in Australia. Both the Radio Star and the Symphony Leader had amazing similarities to them in the United States, and the company there was called the Pilot Radios, although there's no link between the new manufacturers that have been found. Here's another Bakelite product. It was called the Astor Football Radio. Pretty fun. And then, of course, guitars. Here's the face of a Fender guitar from the 1950s. Previously, celluloid-based substances would be melted down and formed, but here now we see this. In addition, Bakelite to society, one of the areas that was most interested in its development was the military. The U.S. government saw Bakelite as an opportunity to open the door to production of new weaponry, and because it was much lighter than steel. In fact, Bakelite was a key ingredient in most of the weapons used in the Second World War. Bakelite was also used for domestic purposes such as electrical insulators. It proved to be more effective than any other material that they had available. So effectively, it's still in use today. Bakelite was electrically resistant, chemically stable, heat resistant, shatterproof, and would neither crack, fade, crease, or discolor from exposure to sun, dampness, or sea salt. And there, if anybody's into poker. Another new area of plastics was rayon and cellophane. So let's take a look at rayon. Rayon, another modified cellulose, was first developed in 1891 in Paris by a Frenchman by the name of Louis Marie Berrionneau. He was the Count of Chardonnat, and he was searching for a way to produce man-made silk. After studying silkworms, Berrionneau noticed that the worm would secrete a liquid from a narrow orifice that would harden upon exposure to air and then turn into silk. In the late 1870s, he was working with Louis Pasteur on a remedy for the epidemic that was destroying French silkworms. Failure to clean up a spill in the darkroom resulted in Chardonnet's discovery of nitrocellulose as a potential replacement for real silk. Realizing the value of such a discovery, Chardonnay began to develop the product immediately. Here's just a fun little video image. Unfortunately, his material was extremely flammable and was subsequently replaced with other more stable materials. But he was the first one to patent the artificial silk, and called it, eventually was called rayon in 1855. And here we have the Rayon Inferno. A team of 3 British inventors, Charles Cross, Edward Bevan, and Clayton Beadle, obtained a patent for viscose or artificial silk, a man-made cellulose-based fabric with the feel of its natural namesake. However, unlike its artificial predecessor, it was not flammable like the rayon that the Frenchman had made. Cross and Charles Stern, the head of the Zurich Incandescent Lamp Company, established London's Viscose Spinning Syndicate in 1898 to research and streamline the new fabric production. Stern's assistant was a glass blower by the name of Fred Topham, and he invented a special pump for doling out a honey-like solution of wood pulp and alkalines to a machine with little tiny holes to discharge all the filaments, and then those filaments would be twisted into a yarn, and the spinning container actually became known as the Topham box. The next one is cellophane. Cellophane was discovered by Dr. Jacques Brandenburger. He was a Swiss textile engineer who came upon an idea for a clear protective packaging layer in 1900. Brandenburger was seated at a restaurant when he noticed a customer spill a bottle of wine onto the tablecloth. And the waiter, of course, quickly removed the tablecloth, replacing it with another, and disposed of the soiled one. Brandenburg said he would discover some way to apply a clear, flexible film to that cloth, which would keep it safe from such accidents and allow it to be easily cleaned with a swipe of a clean towel. And hence, he started to work on cellophane. He worked on resolving the problem by utilizing different materials until he hit pay dirt in 1913 by adding his old friend, our old friend really, viscose, also known as rayon. Brandenburger added viscose to the cloth, but the end result was brittle. It was too stiff to be of any use. Yet Brandenburg saw another potential for this viscose material. I wonder what that might be. He developed a new machine that could produce viscose sheets, which he marketed as cellophane. With a few more improvements, cellophane allowed for a clear layer of packaging for any product, the first fully flexible waterproof wrap. In the 1920s, a plastics craze as the use of cellophane spread through the world, one of the industry leaders, DuPont, became a hotbed for innovation concerning plastics. Wallace Hume Crothers, a young Harvard chemist, became the head of the DuPont lab. The company was responsible for moisture-proofing the cellophane and was well on its way to developing nylon, which at the time they had called Fiber 66. Nylon is again a thermoplastic silky material first used commercially in a nylon bristled toothbrush, followed more famously by women's stockings. It is made of repeating units linked by amide bonds and is frequently referred to as polyamide. Nylon was the first commercially successful synthetic polymer. There are two common methods of making nylon for fiber applications. In one approach, molecules with an acid group on each end reacted with the molecules containing amine on the other end. So it ended up being a long form of polymer chains. Crothers saw possibilities of using the new tough Fiber 66, and it replaced animal hair in toothbrushes, and silk stockings started to be made of it. The stockings were unveiled in 1939, and the public loved them. In Germany, they were the first to recognize the structural nature of the plastics and built upon Crothers' theories. As demonstrated by Crothers, by substituting and inserting elements into a chemical chain, new materials could be used and developed, and many, many more plastics started to be created. During the 1940s, the war saw the use of such materials as nylon, acrylic, neoprene, SBR, polyethylene, and many, many more polymers take place in the natural materials supply list that were now becoming exhausted. And then they started using them in furniture too. And here's a good example of sort of mid-century furniture. And the company was called Naugahyde, abbreviated. It was an American brand of artificial leather, or also sometimes called pleather. And it was made by, the skin of a kind of mystical animal called the Naga. Naugahyde is a composite of knit fabric backing and polyvinyl chloride, PVC, plastic coating on the top. It was developed by Uniroyal Engineered Products and is now manufactured and sold by a division of that same company, the Naugahyde Company. Its name, first used as a trademark in 1936, comes from the borough of Naugatuck, Connecticut, where it was first produced. Uniroyal asserts that Naugahyde is one of the most popular pleather leathers. And Naugahyde is also produced now in Stoughton, Wisconsin. Here's an advertising campaign showing the fictional Naga character from, and it's Naga skin, which is, of course, made of vinyl. A marketing campaign of the 1960s and 70s asserted humorously that the Naugahyde was obtained from the skin of an animal called the Naga. The claim became an urban myth. The campaign emphasized that unlike other animals, which must typically be slaughtered to obtain their skins, Nagas love to shed their skin without harm to themselves. The Naga doll, a squat-horned monster with wide-toothed grin, became popular in the 1960s, and you can still find them today. And here we have a nice little ad from the mid-century with a Naugahyde chair. It was also used in kitchens. So here we have like a Naugahyde kitchen chair. And then, of course, Formica. Formica was invented in 1912 by Daniel O'Connor and Herbert Faber, and they worked at Westinghouse. Originally, they conceived it as a substitute for insulators, for electrical insulators, and it was composed of many layers of resin-impregnated craft paper and topped with decorative layers of melamine, and then compressed and curved into whatever shape they wanted. PVC was accidentally discovered at least twice in the 19th century, first in 1835 and then in 1872. Both occasions, the polymer appeared on white solid inside flasks of vinyl chloride and when left exposed to sunlight. The Russian chemist Ivan Ostromlemsky worked with the German chemist Fritz Klatt, and they both attempted to use PVC or polyvinyl chloride in commercial products, but they had difficulty because it was so rigid. And so by being able to create this sort of processed, layered look, it really worked well. And then we see, just more and more and more plastics, polyvinyl chlorides and other forms. There's our, aluminum and so on, like really making the life of the modern housewife so much easier. So she gets to throw off her chains, throw off her broom and her apron, and now she has more time to enjoy herself. Another plastic designer during this time is this gentleman, Earl Silas Tupper. He was born in New Hampshire to a farming family, and during his youth and his boyhood in New England, his mother, Lulu Clark Tupper, took in laundry and ran a boarding house, and his father operated a small family farm. He loved to tinker, and he developed labor-saving devices all the time for the farm and for the family greenhouses. And one of his devices, a frame to facilitate the cleaning of chickens, was granted a patent. It was from his father that Earl Tupper is said to have developed this love for invention. And then, of course, he decided to work on this container that would keep food fresh. And here we have his actual drawings and from the patent from 1957 for the first Tupperware resealable bowl. And there we can see the little ridge and the ridge that was made in the plastic bowl. He used inflexible pieces of polystyrene slag given to him by DuPont. Tupper purified the slag and molded it to create lightweight, non-breakable bowls, cups, plates, and even gas masks that were used during World War II. He later designed liquid-proof, airtight lids by duplicating the lid of a paint can. He founded Tupperware Plastics in 1938, and in 1946, he introduced Tupperware Plastics to hardware and department stores, but he didn't really get very much attention. So in 1948, he joined forces with a young woman by the name of Brownie Wise, and she made a lengthy phone call to his office in South Grafton, Massachusetts, in which she said that she could sell the Tupperware by having a house party. And so, based on marketing strategies developed by her, Tupperware was withdrawn from sales at retail stores in 1950, and Tupperware parties became popular. This was the first instance of party plan marketing, which has been successfully emulated by many other companies. The corporate headquarters was moved from Massachusetts to Orlando, Florida, after a falling out with Wise, which resulted in her 1958 dismissal. Tupperware sold the Tupperware company, or Tupper sold it to Rexall in, I'm not really sure what year, but he ended up getting $16 million. I believe it was, and then sometime in the late 70s. He ended up dying in 1984, at which point the Tupperware patent expired, and then we see all of these plastic containers now with all of the Tupperware, signature, the stuff that he had designed. And here's one last design. Denmark, again, industrialized after the war. Danish designers started, and here we have these nesting plastics. We see these really popular, and these are from the 1940s. And so the idea here is that we're better living through chemistry. Throughout the 1950s, headlines announced that the whole world was going plastic. Yay. Oh, maybe not, because what do we have? We have plastic pollution. And definitely check out the video section of the course and take a look at some of the videos there on plastic pollution. So this technology was a new generation of post-war plastics, did indeed seem like a revolutionary concept at the time, gave carefree beauty and so on, but it really changed American culture.